I'm Julie Sherwood, the Education and Engagement Manager for the Wichita Public Library, and I'd like to welcome you to the third program in our Fall Gardening series. We're so glad you could join us tonight. We're happy to be partnering for this program series with the K-State Research and Extension and their Master Gardeners.
Hi, I'm going to be talking today about gardening with native plants. And actually in a naturalistic and prairie plant style. We're going to be talking about perennials and grasses. And I'm going to divide my presentation into various parts. The first one will be a group of definitions and of terms that I think would be helpful to keep clear in our minds when we're learning a little more about this, if you want to do so. Then we're going to move on to a few design tips about how you can actually get together a naturalistic or a prairie plant type gardening. Then I'm going to take you through a little walk, an abbreviated walk through my garden as it's been this year, up to about a week ago. And we're going to move on and do grasses. Most of you have received already the email with the PDF. And you will notice that we will have more slides in the PDF that we are going to go through today. And the reason for that is that I wanted to give you a central source where you can get ideas about any type of plant that you are interested in. So the last part, we end with grasses. Then there's a list of perennials. And each perennial plant will have 2 slides, and the grasses too. One is the name of the plant with all the specific information that you need to see if you're interested in that plant or not. And the second slide on that particular plant will be a plant in a garden situation. Then we're going to move on to carex and sedges. We won't be talking about them, but they are there on your PDF. And then we're going to move on to what I call companion plants, just to a few tips on the aesthetics of how you can combine plants. So starting with what is a native plant. There's really no definite definition. It could be a North American native, but was here before the Europeans arrived. But then you can say, is that the Spanish Europeans in the 1500s? Or is it not Northern Europeans and the English in the early 1600s? Or it could be a plant that grows in the area without any human help. But if it's an indigenous plant, what distance from where we are to call it native? 50, 200 miles? Or is it a plant that is found in any of the 50 contiguous states? And if that is so, fine. But are we going to push the envelope a little bit more and do what a lot of the Europeans and other gardeners are doing throughout the world? If it can live in our community, it's a native art, and we can just go ahead and accept it. That's an idea. So why do we use natives anyway? For me, it was just curiosity, and we're surrounded by beautiful native plants. And as we do it, we realize that we're saving money and time because a lot of these plants will last longer and live and survive our climate a little better. We're going to be saving some water and at the same time helping the birds, butterflies, and insects survive. Variety. What is a variety? We see it in books, in lectures. We see it on little cards that come with your plants. Well, a variety is a classification just below the species. And you know, Linnaeus back in the early 1700s decided that we should be able to classify plants, animals, and minerals in the same manner because that's going to help us to learn. And he was right, brilliant guy. But, well, anyway, so it starts with the kingdom, then it goes on to phylum, and then the classes, order, family. Then we have the genus and the species that we deal with most of the time. And right below that species is variety. That's a plant that can occur in nature. And also it gives the same unique characteristics as the parent plant. It germinates with the same characteristics. How do we write these things? For example, here we have the genus and the species. Both of them are with italics. Genus, capital letter, species, not a capital letter. If it's a variety, there's a little difference in that plant, then it's VAR dot, whatever you call it. This one has red bracts, so it's rubra for red. The other thing is a cultivar, the most common thing in the nurseries, a cultivated variety, and is propagated asexually by cuttings, grafts, meristem tissue culture, etc. And the name of the variety is always in single quotation marks. So here we would have phlox, paniculata, genus, species, single quotation marks, box letters, blue boy. That's what a cultivar is, a hybrid. That's the one with the big X. It is a sexual reproduction between two different species. And I always said, remember the ass. So they can be naturally cross-pollinated, but most of the ones that we come across have actually cross-pollinated on purpose for desirable traits. So they cost a little bit more, and there's always an X in the name of the plant. And what is a cultivar? Oops. So we were talking about hybrids. And excuse me about this. Okay, so we're going to be moving forward. And the cultivars are the ones that have a lot of money involved. And because they have to pay for the brain power that goes into making them, they have to pay the people that work on there, and they have a T, M, or an R on the little card. And what that means is that they are under patent. And so you do not sell it. Whatever you do not sell it for any reason, for any charity, fundraiser, whatever. Do not sell it. And then one of the things that I would like to make sure is native plants look good in old gardens. All these are different garden aesthetics, and you do fine with all the native plants. This is not what we're talking about. We're not talking about meadows. Meadows are a combination of grasses and wildflowers. We are going to mention meadows later on, but this is not the purpose of this presentation. We're talking about a prairie-style garden, a little naturalistic, where you see plants that you can see in your nature areas naturally. And in here, for example, you see a group of heleniums, silphians, grasses, some dried penstemons. And by the way, in some of my slides, you're going to see some letters in the right lower corner. Those are people that I want to give credit to, either because I copied something from them, or I mentioned in a book, or their name as authors. So Outhoff is a name that you should know, because Pete Outhoff is the great guy from the last century, the 20th century, in the last 50 years. He just retired in 2018, but be that as it may, he pushed the idea of prairie garden, prairie styles, and natural prairie styles ahead. In the Montreal Botanical Gardens and in the High Line, you see the plants that we know from our plains. The grasses, the rudbeckias, the solidagos, the zebra grasses, as well as very exotic color plants, pink, coneflowers, and monardas. And of course, these have already flowered, and these are the Amsonia hubrechtii. And this is my favorite park and garden that he made, the Millennium Lurie Garden. But actually, I like it because it shows a lot of the principles of a prairie garden. Mother Nature wakes up very, very late for our human taste in the spring. And the reason that I'm telling you that is because you're seeing these bulbs here. These are white tulips. And you say, well, those aren't prairie plants. No, but there are a lot of use of bulbs of all types in prairie gardens. And the reason is that you want to see color. You want to see nature waking up early in the spring, but you also see that they are being planted in an irregular pattern, almost a wave-like pattern. You also see that there is repetition of colors and of plants, almost like in music. You hear an echo of a group of sounds. And here you're seeing this one. You also see the different heights of the plants, and you also see that they're wave-like patterns. And this is the famous salvia river, or a wave of salvia, multiple different colors of salvia, different heights, and different flowering time. And if there is an idea on the table, somebody's going to push the envelope a little bit far out. And Duncan BRINE, if you ever come across any of his work, he blogs, he actually has written articles for Garden Gauge magazine. He is a naturalistic gardener. And his big thing is that he even shows you his house in what looks like a middle class suburb with plants that look like they just came from a nature place. Something like this. It almost looks as if the house was just put in there. But he always says that in order to show that there is a brain behind this, a human brain, do benches or little places where you can sit and do a few pathways, and put some flowers that you like, that are native, into these nature plantings. So what are we talking about, naturalistic gardens? We're talking about stable plant communities, and that's how all these people that are writing about it refer to stable plant communities, because they exist together, all survive in the conditions that you give them. And the reason that they do that is because they like the same physical conditions, the light, the moisture, the soil, the pH. And when you choose these plants, choose plants that have about the same vigor, because otherwise they die, because the ones that are dominant will take over the place. Also, plant them close together, and there are advantages. They kind of hold each other up, and also they keep the weeds down. So when you are thinking naturalistic gardens, you're thinking plant communities that have evolved over time together. They have adapted to the same environmental changes together. And the insects that are in the area, for example, have adapted to these plants. And believe it or not, the plants have adapted or changed to use the insects better. So the ideas that you're going to be using is that naturalistic or prairie plant style gardens have plants that grow in irregular patterns, and you're going to set them like that. Some plants are dominant and therefore are repeated throughout because they're stronger and they can set house, as it were, in different areas. Usually there is a limited palette of plants. And the reason for that is because some of them are dominant, then they get rid of the weak ones. And then plants are arranged loosely, just like you see them in the nature areas. Michael King here, and I like little mantras throughout, that's the way I think. Michael King is a great writer. He's one of the very many people who's written books without of. But he says, nature knows no human boundaries. And what does that mean? Well, nativars and native plants, if they can live together, it doesn't matter where they come from, because the plants don't know whether they come from Kazakhstan or South Africa or Wichita, Kansas. If they find the resources to survive, they're happy. The other thing that he says is humans know no planting boundaries. If we like a plant, we like to try it. We like to work with it. We like to make them happy, but don't try too hard. And he also says gardens are not plant reserves. A garden is not to be a static situation where you're going to keep the one plant of each thing. No, gardens are changing because climates change and nature changes. Now, There is a writer that many of you know, Rainer, and the Great Book of Rainer and West, Planting in a Post-Wild World. At least look at the pictures. And in there he says, the concept of a design plant community is entirely agnostic about where plants come from. So if you have friends that act like the plant police, they're losing their job. Because agnostic means that you don't really care. Just like in the philosophy courses that you took in college or in high school, you don't really care. And the semantics behind that is that, you know what, I don't care and I don't know. Agnostic is I don't know and I don't really care. So let's say that you decide that you're going to try it. So remember, you're going to, if you've never done it before, you're going to be in the steep part of the learning curve. Consider your taste and gardening style before you start, because you don't want to lose money and time and end up with nothing. And remember, if you're going to try an outside garden, be sure you remember you have neighbors and something called the neighborhood association. They may not see the beauty in what you're doing. And you need some inspiration, you need some knowledge. Go and see areas where they have these plants in a garden. The Wichita Art Museum has a beautiful garden with native plants outside. Go and spend some time there. The Heston, the Dick Arboretum in Heston also does. Start small, start slowly, ask questions, and at some point, once you know what you're doing, yeah, buy from catalogs. So, how to bring it home. Now you decided you're gonna try it. Here are a few guidelines. Try not to copy nature. It's impossible to do. You're just being inspired by nature. Group plants by common habitat. If you have an area that looks like a woodland, don't bring a plant that would be very happy in the Arizona desert botanical garden. So the other thing is, remember, it's a little bit of nature, it's a little bit of art, it's a little bit of science. Every garden is going to look a little different if you're trying these techniques of gardening, because the area where you are putting them, where you're planting, is a little different. However, no matter what you do, no matter how wild you want it to look, make sure that you have some structure, that you have some bones, something that tells you, tells people, there is a mind behind this. And in the winter, whenever there's no green, there still is an architectural feeling that there is structure there. So design tips for these gardens is the plant in a random fashion, but wave, so there's a pattern. And you can repeat this pattern across the whole planting area. Choose plants that are like real nature around you. If you don't like the wild species, try the cultivars or the hybrids. And that all plants that you choose can live together in a community. So, how to get the look of a naturalistic or a prairie plant style? Whenever you're thinking about putting a garden together, you're thinking about hardscape, softscape, what I call elements that make a garden yours and make it fun to be in, and the plant material. I put two pictures here to show you hardscape. This one, maybe they spent some hundreds of dollars and they did it all themselves and they used a lot of material of their own. And it looks wonderful and they are happy with it and the plants look very happy. This one down here, I don't think the people that lived in this house did all this work themselves. That's okay. And they paid a lot of money for it, but it also has the same presentation that this one has. It fits in New Mexico where this came from. It fits in New Mexico with the boulder and the scattered greens. So it's the nature around it that makes the design work. Also, it says human-made structures. And you know what? Minimum views. But if you like it, try it. It might work. Softscape are those anchoring plants that are going to anchor the edges, that are going to give your the taller shrubs, the smaller trees, that are going to give your garden a structure. And then you can fill in with the smaller shrubs, etc. Also, the lights are part of the softscape and the irrigation systems. And then what I call the usual garden elements, you need seats, you need little benches, and you need water. A garden without water is like being on a diet all the time and not trying the good food at the banquet table. No, no, you need water because we are human beings. We and the little birds and insects around us need the water. And you don't need to have a huge fountain. You can just buy a little tiny fountain and put it in a fun place where you can hear it. And art, you need art. You need to put the hand of men and women in your garden. And you don't need a big, gigantic topiary. You don't need a big, gigantic statuary. You can put an empty, beautiful pot and keep it there. Remember, you live in a winter area, so don't let water be there throughout the winter because it's going to crack. And always buy high fire if you're going to use it empty. Then you're going to have plant material that you need. Always look at the USDA plant hardiness zone with 6B, and that's very important. Otherwise, you're going to be losing a lot of plants. You're going to be using flowering perennials, and you're going to be using grasses. And make sure that your flowering perennials are exuberant, that they are loose, that they have an informal growth, because you need to soften the edges of your hardscape and of your walkways. And make sure that your plants don't need much staking. If they need sun and they will stay up. If you put a tall plant that needs full day sun in the shade or in part shade, you're going to need to stake it. Do I stake? Yes, I stake. And then ornamental and native grasses. That's very important. You can use them a specimen, one specimen that's tall or even a small specimen, or you can use them to cover a whole area to define the limits of your property or against the wall. They bring texture and movement to your garden, and it plays with the sunlight just beautifully in the morning and in the evening. And vines. Well, I think they cover a lot of walls, a lot of ugly things, but some of them tend to be a little thuggish, and you will hear me use the word thug. It's a plant that spreads on its own without any respect for anything. And then there's a well-behaved, socially acceptable plant. And I told you that we would not be using meadows, but this is Michael from Michael King's book. And this area is the one without it, just on a nice day. This is after a big rain, and this is in the fall, all around this library. And the thing is that what he's done here is grasses and some flowers. And these are asters. And asters, many asters start flowering about August, the middle to the end of August, and they go until the last frost. And they are beautiful. Not the little pink ones that you get in a pot in the spring or just to fill in, but the ones that you put actually on the ground and they will grow in their own way. The big-leaved asters, for example, Rabin's aster, they are gorgeous, and you're seeing them here. And notice how this meadow, even when it's dry, has quality. It looks brown. But I think that if you're going to be doing naturalistic or prairie plants, you have to accept the death of plants. And the fact that when they die, they look brown or yellow or gray. But once you accept that, and if you pick plants that have architectural appearance and some elegance, even when they're dead, fine. And besides, they provide some food for the birds if you leave the seed heads on. And you're doing a lot of good. Whatever you do, do not choose polyploides. If you like the polyploides and you accept the fact that you're getting them for yourself, great. You can have 400 little florets in the center of a coneflower. That's great if you like it. But those bees or those insects are not going to have the nectary lines. They're not going to see them. And they need to follow those lines to get the nectar. And they cannot live without that because that's protein and sugar sources. And they see things differently than we do, different color, black and white, and these lines lead them to their food. And polyploidy plants do not allow them to do that. And so now we're gonna go to my garden. And all of these are in a chronological order. And I'm starting here around the end of March, early April. And I've already had activity, flower activity in my garden since February, because for 25 years, I have had hellebores. And they are in flower when nothing is flowering. And when the late spring comes and they lose their flowers, they have those gigantic, beautiful, glossy palmate leaves, very exotic. You might even think you're in some exotic South American place. But after that, I do not put any aconitum. I do not have any snowdrops. I go directly to early daffodils. And I have daffodils of every stage of the spring all the way to very late spring. I have them all over the front and the back of my garden. And so the tete-a-tetes are the first ones that come, and these actea, the white ones, are some of the last ones. This is my front garden. You will be seeing it, and the neighbors have never complained. These are tulips. I have about 2,000 tulips in the front and in the back. So what do? I like them mixed. I like primary colors, and I know they will not give me this kind of a show the second year, so I just swallow hard and I get rid of them. How do I do that? When they begin to lose their petals, I go ahead and I cut off the stems. I leave the tulip leaves there because I interplant with whatever it is I'm going to put that year in the area, or waiting for the perennials to come up in between them. And then once those have started to come up and they can stand on their own, I will go ahead and I will pull them out and put them in my compost pile. And if you want a beautiful, well-behaved plant, it is the Baptisia. Here they are, Baptisias. They come in almost every color. They do not suffer very much from insects or from powdery mildew or anything like that. And they are very clean. They're very clean, socially acceptable plants. I love them. These have been here for 5 years. And spring is not spring for me without alliums. Yes, they are expensive, but I think I buy them from a place called Color Blends. And they have the best quality, and they're so much cheaper than Brex and Dutch tulips and whatever it is. They come to you directly from Holland. And no, they don't give me 10% either, so don't worry about it. So these are a group, and I usually group them, and they last for about 4 weeks with their color, and then they begin to form seeds. And even when they are gray, they are still standing up straight and giving some form or architecture to your garden. And this is, it's been here since 1989, the Catman, and it's just beautiful. It comes back every year. I have about 6 different kinds of alliums, and I interplant them all over, the Schubertii, the Christophii, and right, at least in the front of the house, the moment that the tulips begin to die off, I have the irises coming up. And in the front, I have very pastelish colors, which is not me, but I have them there for a long, long time, and they start flowering. So from the time the hellebore starts all the way through the first frost, I have something blooming in every part of my garden. And in the back, I have very dark, colorful, different colors of irises. And I am trying to move this out of the way. There we go. And one of the things here is that I'm going to show you this corner because I plant, and it's good to plant in this type of garden in layers. Layers of flowering time, layers of colors, layers of height, layers of texture, differences throughout the weeks. So I have already removed the tulips from here. You can see that these penniseums are coming up. The peonies have already flowered. I have, you can't see them very well, but I have 3, 1 and then 2 on this side, Christophii alliums, and these are the Papaver somniferums. And later on in the summer, this Russian sage gets huge and purple, and I love it. So there's always activity in that area. I have 4 sites throughout the front and back where I have penstemons. I have had every color of penstemons unknown to men in my garden in the last 25 years, but I only have 3 now. And my favorite is this one. Penstemons digitalis is white, and this year it was just gorgeous. And then you can see that in the front, I also have a group of alliums, and people have actually stopped in the last 3 years and said, what are those? They are alliums, they are beautiful. Anyway, penstemons are self-seeders. And remember, there's a book called Plantiful, Plantiful. And what it tells you is you can have beautiful gardens with self-seeders. And penstemons are. I go out to weed probably every other week in the springtime. And if I don't like where their self-seeding is, I just throw them away or transplant them. And the other 2 that I have are the dark towers and the Husker Reds. And this is to remind me that not only in the Devil Wears Prada movie is somebody else making decisions for you on what you like, but also in the commercial world of nursery plants. Because you think that you go and you choose. No, they already chose for you. There's only a few things that they have for sale, and they repeat it every year until nobody's buying it. So what I do is I look through books and I look through catalogs, and sometimes there is a place in England called Chiltern Seeds. You can get on the internet, order your seeds, and they come by mail in a little envelope, no problems. They're not that expensive. This is Phlomis, P-H-L-O-M-I-S, Phlomis tuberosa. It has a floret of big leaves at the base. It self-seeds very slowly. It's been here for 5 years, and I have 3 of these now. I have some in the front, and these are these big stalks, about 5 feet tall, of beautiful pink flowers. These are pinks. Here we go and we look at the leaves in the fall, and we have a great time looking at the fall leaves and the colors. Well, the English tend to do the bluebells. They go see the blues, and they go see the pinks. These are Silene dioicheis, and I have had these for about 4 years now, and they keep coming back, and they self-seed also. Now, there is a place where you can get a lot of these strange plants. It's called Heritage Farms. They do not give me 10% either. Heritage Farms from Wisconsin. And Betty, the owner, actually wraps them up in newspaper and sends them over only when it's safe from the weather. And the other thing that she does, she puts in a little history about the plant. And it's just wonderful because you know the whole history of the plant and the The roots are wonderful. These roots have been working for 2-3 years before she sells them. You saw this area here with tulips, and what happens is, as far as when I remove the tulips, the Aurelias, A-R-I-A-L-A, the Aurelias come up. I love this color. I think that it fits in any garden. This is Aurelia Sun King, and it was one of those plants of the year a few years ago. I didn't know that. And these are grasses. I have areas full of grasses, and in between I have plants that have flowers. So around here in the back, you see the penstemons here. I'm going to get some curasavicas coming up, and there are 2 little orange things because right on this side of it, I have about 20 Aquilegia canadiensis. They're just gorgeous. And if you want a beautiful plant that forms beautiful plumes of inflorescence, expands very slowly, is not a thug, and lasts forever. You will see that a week and a half ago, they're still standing there, dry but beautiful. This is Persicaria polymorpha. It's beautiful. And clematis, I have 3 clematis, and I mix them into some of my artwork. I paint my fences. And why am I telling you this? Because people say, well, you should be very natural. Maybe. I like blue in my garden. My husband used to love different colors. He picked this ochre color and a green color on the other side. So I paint my fences. And I figured if it was good enough for Majorel, that great, beautiful painter that invented a special blue for his garden in Morocco, it's good enough for me. And the other person who painted his walls and fences in his garden was Burl Marx, and he was a German fellow who did gardening in Brazil. Gorgeous gardens. But anyway, and this one, I am trying this one out, and I'm just telling you that it's called a Martagon lily, and it's taken me 3 years of killing plants of Martagon, and finally I got 3 of these. This is the first one that came up. And one interesting thing is they're all over the continent except in Australia. They're not in Australia, they're even in Siberia, and there is a special native type that is very rare and almost gone in California. And this is to show you the alliums when they are dying. Even when they are dying, they have a special color. And this used to be a complete shade. I removed a white bud tree from the center, and I have planted a big pampas grass, 3 of them actually, and so this will have to go. I love this color. I told you I love that lemon, that lime green, because it mixes with other plants in a very natural way, and so does this chocolatey black-brown color. Chiso, it helps me fill in. I do not like to see a lot of mulch in between. I do not like to see bare areas. If I think I need more mulch, I say to myself with one of my little mantras, no, you need more plants. And so, see this? This is called betony, B-E-T-T-O-N-Y, and it must be getting hot in the world of commercial nurseries because it was given a whole page in Garden Gate in the last 3 months. Purple, I hear there's pink, I don't know. But I love the purple. It's one of the 100 favorite plants for out of. But it takes a lot of the wind because these stalks are fairly rigid. And these are Liriopes. Would I plant them now? No, these were planted in the year 2000 and have been there for a long time. Too much money and time to remove them, so I tried to make them interesting as follows. I interplant little alliums throughout, so this part is purplish in the spring, and then I also interplant Verbena bonariensis for the late spring and summer. I'll show you the Verbena bonariensis. And did you know that Liriope was the mother of Narcissus in Greek mythology? Boy, the botanists really were educated. So anyway, this is that same corner that I've been showing you. Now I have the pods of the Papaver somniferum of the poppies, and here is the Tura. Later on, these Penicilliums are gonna take over. And if you want a beautiful plant that lasts for a long time, has a good appearance, it's clean, it's not a thug, and it's actually beautiful, is Verinocastrum. Verinocastrum virginicum comes up a little bit sooner, is taller, and not as thick in their inflorescence as this one down here, which is Verinocastrum lavender towers. And it is interplanted in between a lot of the monardas. Painting the back of my fence, and that's fine. I also use boxes. Why? Because I don't believe in the plant police. There has to be some aesthetics, and this defines, it gives them like a background so you can enjoy the colors of your plants a little bit more. I love Asiatic lilies and tree lilies and orientals. I do not use Orient pets. And at one point there were like 20 Asiatic lilies here. And here in the front, I have all these monardas. The big problem with monardas is powdery mildew. If you buy the ones that say Monarda didymus, D-I-D-Y-M-A, you're gonna get powdery mildew, I can assure you. Now, the other ones are powdery mildew resistant. To tell you the truth, I use Jacob Klein, never had powdery mildew. I use Purple Rooster, and I use what I call the wine series. There is strawberry wine and raspberry wine. They're kind of purplish, pinkish, and they do not suffer from that. Can they get it? Yes, but somehow I haven't gotten it in the last 7 years. This area is my yellow area. Solidagos, I have 5 different kinds, and it's gonna be all in your slides, in your PDF. And this is the table for the banquet that I get ready for the butterflies. I saw 1 monarch butterfly this year so far, but these are beautiful. They are thugs, they spread all over. You plant them today, in the morning you wake up and they're in bed with you. Not a good plant, but they are beautiful. The butterflies love them. And to tell you the truth, it doesn't matter how many of these we plant here, because they have to go back to Mexico to the Oyamel forest. And guess what? They don't want them back there. They want to get rid of the Oyamel furs so that they can grow plants. I mean, they're poor people, who knows? I'm not going to judge. But these are beautiful, but they're very thuggish. So I go in November and I go ahead and I just tear about 50% out of there. I don't want them because the more you live there, the more they will spread. They spread by rhizomes. I have a lot of pots, and most of my pots are blue or brown, and these are rudbeckias. And here is that area where now they are in bloom. Some of the monardas are already dead, and this is another a variety, and here they are. And I have about 15 of these in a wave, and you can see this little purple one, a sign that the liatris are coming up pretty soon, and these are coming up too. And this is just to show you the purple roosters, monardas, and this is a lot of pots that I use, and this is for the butterflies larvae. This week I had 10 larvae, and they're eating it. I love it. And here you can see that you can use tall plants right in the front of the border. It doesn't matter if you like it. I like to feel that I need a machete to go out and get through my garden, and that's fine. And then see, this gives a background. It defines where the pennisetums, hamlets are. And again, yes, I did this on purpose. If you know the rules, you can break them and you have to live with it, or you can get rid of them and start all over again. And I like to echo colors. I have these tigress lilies that have been here for about 15 years. And here it's a bunch of coleus, ochre colors, so they kind of echo the color. And these are the Verbena bonariensis. If you want to see gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous plants moving in the Kansas wind, these are them. They self-seed. You can just, and they're very grateful that you pay attention to them, because I just take out the little germinant plants and I put them someplace else, and they usually come up. My yellow areas, I said that I had 5 different kinds of solidagos, goldenrods. I also, all of these are 5 different kinds of rudbeckias. And yes, if I like something, I bring all the friends. I always say it's the immigrants' problem. You like San Francisco, California, you bring all your friends and relatives over. You like Wichita, Kansas, you bring all your friends and relatives over. So that's what we're doing here. And this is Cestus. Has lived here for 7 years, and it's from the Pampas, similar region as here. And this is that Russian sage that I told you about. And it lets me into the only area where there are no flowers. I have a bench, I sit there and I say no work to do, because all I have are these artwork. Makes me think of Alice in Wonderland. And I use hibiscus because I like to feel that there are times and areas where it looks exotic. And this is that same area. I started with tulips, and then I had the Aurelias, and now are the irisines, because this color picks up the color of the Japanese maple. And pots, and there are a lot of cleomis around. I let them dry, the seeds dry in their own pods. The birds eat them, and I always buy new ones to make sure that the genetic material is always brand new. So they mix up. All of these are pots that I have. And I showed you there was one little liatris coming up. Now there are all of these liatris. The Hyperions are here, and the Coreopsis are coming up. So there's always activity. So when you buy your plants, not only do they have to live together, the colors that you buy, the heights that you buy have to go together. You have to say to yourself, is this color gonna go with this new, when this other plant next to it is flowering, is it going to look good together? Echoes here and here, and again, the same area, because I have multiple different types of rudbeckias there. Rudbeckias that I have here, for example, are 2 kinds of laciniatas. The wild golden glow is just huge. It's about 10 feet tall. And these are silphiums. If you put silphiums, if you plant silphiums, make sure you know that it self-seeds like crazy. And every time, if you're walking by, it doesn't matter if you're wearing your high heels, you see one, you walk in there and you take it out. And these are Tithonias. And the insects just love Tithonias. Beautiful color, they go to it. And I have 3 different kinds of salvias over here that are going to flower. Amistad, black and blue, and Brazil blue. And this is the last part of the trip. This is outside, and when I plant outside, I plant bright colors, and because either I come and I see them and I go, oh, how nice, or else the neighbors get fun out of looking at the colors. Here are the rudbeckias, here are the sylphians, and these are also going to be yellow. And these are the last goldenrods to flower, rugosa fireworks. And I told you that the Persicaria polymorpha lasts forever. This was last week. Started at the end of April and it's still last week, and look at it. And of course, Joe Pye weed. So prairie plants can adapt, but you have to adapt. If you want all your ducks in a row in their beautiful little black vests with their little bow ties perfectly tied, this is not for you, because it looks as if there is a mind behind them. There's a design behind the whole thing, but lo and behold, looks just about to go wild, okay? Limit the number of species and follow the same design ideas as you would in a regular garden. Choose plants with interest across the seasons. Remember that some of them are prolific self-seeders, and encourage compact growth. I have some of the Solidagos rigida that I prune by mid-June to half of its height. And this is so that they don't get huge and flop. This is a list, and the list is from the book called Prairie-Style Gardens by Steiner. It's out of print, but it's a good book, and this list, it's the name of the plants that you can prune very, very early by mid-June, no more than half the height. Prairie plants you can divide every 3 to 4 years to prevent overcrowding. It helps them stay healthier and stronger. They bloom better, but if you're gonna do it in the early spring so that they have a full season to recover. Deep taproots such as milkweed, sylphians, and lead plants, not a good idea, because you're going, most of the time I cut the taproot because it's too deep. As far as the grasses are concerned, I cut them down at about the end of February. And there are some plants to avoid in small gardens because they tend to spread too much. Now, plants you should know: ornamental grasses, and it means nothing. There is no scientific basis for the term ornamental grasses. It's commercial. Nevertheless, if they have narrow strap-like leaves, parallel veins, and seed heads, they fit into that category. There is actually true grasses have a family called Poaceae, and other ones that fit in are the cattails, the rushes, and the sedges. There is a book by an author called Ondra, O-N-D-R-A, called Grasses, that is great. It's a great book. At least look at the pictures. And the grass shapes are important to us, and because we need to know the shape for the design behind the gardens. So we have tufted grasses like the fescues, mounded grasses like the pennisedums, upright grasses like the Carl Foster, and then there are combinations like the north wind, for example, because the leaves form a big mound and the inflorescence, the stalks, go up. So when you choose ornamental grasses, you need to know what use are you going to make out of them. Is it going to be a specimen plant? And then, or are you going to use them to cover a big area, to define a wall? Does it have any winter interest? And by that, if you want it for winter interest also, make sure that it will not be mush after the first frost. Comes in all heights, and now you can get them in all colors, and you already should know the form. Some of them are annuals, and some of them are perennials. Perennials are the ones that do not die after setting seed. And remember, if you look at a plant and it says perennial, it doesn't mean forever. commercially, all they have to do is to prove that it will live 2 seasons in your house. And you need to know whether they're cool or warm season grasses. Why? Because the cool season grasses begin early in the spring. They begin to come up early and they actually flower in the late to mid-spring. And after 75 degrees, they kind of slow down. And the warm season grasses takes them a little longer to start growing, late April to May, and they thrive in 80 degrees. And the inflorescence doesn't start till probably the middle of July, and some of them not until the end of August, middle of August. And I have a list here for you of cool season grasses and a list of warm season grasses. The other thing that you need to know is it a clump former or a runner and creeper? Why? According to Andra, these are her pictures. Clump forming stays there, but this does not mean that they do not self-seed. The oat grasses self-seed like crazy. And so be careful, but these at least will not spread by stolons, which are above ground, or by rhizomes, which are below ground. Clump-forming grasses, here's a list, and creepers and running grasses, here's a list. So you need to know before you fall in love with a grass, is it annual or perennial? What is your USDA zone? Does it grow in clumps or it spreads like crazy by whatever method they can do it? Cool or warm season? And is it hardy? That's the USDA. If you buy a grass, do not buy a grass that has rolled leaves because that means they've been stressed. You need them to be turgid and have a good color. And if you can, and it's not too big, you're not buying a huge specimen, get it out of the pot and look at the roots. Good roots, they look little furry, little white, just enough roots to hold that soil ball together. Visible roots, if the visible roots are brown and matted, it's been too long in the pot, don't buy it. Now, do I buy plants like that? Yes. I take it home, if it's 50 or 60% off at least. I cut a little disc of the base, and then with my hori-hori knife, I do 3 slits, and I put them, and I plant them. And grasses always grow, but this is not a Kansas state proven method. So this is Laura Knight, just personally telling you what I do when I buy a cheap grass that is on sale. When you plant them, do not do much soil prep and get rid of all the weeds in the area where you're going to plant them. Why? Because if you do that, if you don't do that, if you do not weed or get all the weeds out, you are going to be dealing with weeds forever. They can fly, and then the other thing is how apart. Smaller grasses, 12 to 30 inches, taller grasses, 4 to 5 inches, 4 to 5 feet. Do not fertilize heavily, and until once they're established, do not water much. Okay, now what are you going to do? In the late winter, for me, it's usually the last week in February, I cut them down to 4 to 6 inches, 8 inches above the ground. And what you do is you tie them, you tie the whole sheaf together because you want to make it easier for yourself. You can do it with an electric saw, or you can do it by hand, but whatever it is, what you're going to be doing is, if you tie them, it's easy. It's not messy. And every 4 years or 5 years, you're going to see a hole, a brown hole in your grass clump. That means that it's time to divide. And people say you take it out and you divide it. That's too much work. So what I do is I divide it into 4 parts, and I take out the parts that I am going to remove, and I leave whatever it is that I am going to be leaving behind, and I fill that with new soil, and there you go. Designing with ornamental grasses, you can have a whole garden of grasses, kind of dull, or you can put one in just because, or you can use it as a design point throughout. If you want your garden to look very natural, use about 50% grasses. You need grasses. And if you're going to use a lot of them, be sure that you look at them from various sighting points, because you want to make sure that they look good from wherever they can be seen. Plant in waves, plant for all seasons. Know when those grasses are going to flower. Use texture and color around them by using interplanting with other plants. Place the potted grasses when you buy them where you're going to, where you think, put them where you think you're going to plant them. And the reason is that you might change your mind and you don't want to do all that work and then have to remove them. Right plant for the right place, you know what I mean. Most of them come from open spaces. They need all day sun. There are some that do not. You use grasses because they provide gentle motion, play with the light, and they soften your garden. Cool season grasses. Carl Foster, verticality. Remember, it's an early grass, and here it is very early. This is May and it's already flowering, and this is the end of June and it's already brown. And this is blue fescue, and you can use them, even though it's small, as a specimen. Right here is a specimen plant. And I always say, when you do grasses, make sure that you know what they're going to look like when they first appear in the spring, when they flower, and because and what they're going to look like later on. And this is a very aggressive grass. It can go any place in your garden in one season, but it's beautiful color. And I have it, and I have it planted in the ground, but it cannot get out of there because there's a very wide wall right in front of them. But it is beautiful. You can put it in a pot and use the pots as part of the arrangement. And here's another reason why you should always know what grasses are going to be doing early when they're flowering. And this is a blue oat grass. Later on, after they're through flowering, they're forming seeds, and then later on throughout the rest of the time. This one is nice. It's a tufted hair grass, and you're seeing these more. This is early in the spring. This is about July, and this is later on, and it looks beautiful each time. Warm season grasses. One of the things that is good is that if you have a warm season grass, it starts coming up at about mid to late spring and developing. And the reason that is good is because you can interplant your tulips, and when they're dying, these plants are coming up and they're going to hide the ugly leaves that are dying. And one of them is the big blue stem. Now, if you look at this, this is the way it looks in the spring. And this is later on when it's flowering. And it is not an elegant plant, but it's impressive and airy. And if you have an area that you can look from far away, and if you have an area to define your property or to define a border, yes, this would be a beautiful plant, but it does look a little messy. But you can get some beautiful colors like this red Baron. And this is Blonde Ambition. I don't have enough. It never worked for me. That's all I'm going to say. But it's beautiful. I love it. And they had it here at the extension. It looked beautiful. But this is my favorite. And it's a warm season grass. And it has not begun to flower for me yet. But it begins with this grayish, whitish, silvery plume as inflorescence. And then later on, it mixes so beautifully with some of the fall color of leaves. So I love it. I love it because it begins to bloom and to have activity when things are kind of slowing down in your garden. And this to me, maiden grass, Gracillimus, this is the Stella d'Oro of grasses. I mean, it's all over. Every garden had it back about 10, 15, 20 years ago. And, you know, at that time, that's all we knew. But there are also some miscanthus that are fun, like the zebra grass. And here is with the Persicaria amplexicalis. And here is also in my house with Persicaria painter's palette. And this is after a big storm with my Joe Pye weed. This is already late because it's already flowered. And Pennisetum alopecuroides, I love it. I love the way it moves. I love the inflorescence, and I love the way it mixes with the Russian sage. And anything red that has thick, strappy leaves is probably an annual, and you should treat it like an annual. And I use pots, and this is getting about 6 hours, 7 hours a day, and it looks beautiful. I love that color. But see, what is happening here is that if you treat them as annuals, you can plant them almost any place, and look how beautiful they are. And the colors are gorgeous, and you can put them in pots like I showed you I have in pots. And this is a gorgeous color, and you can use it directly, but it's going to die. Don't let anybody tell you that this is a 6 or a 6B. And just to show you, I already showed you this picture. I bought these 4 together. The color depends a lot on the light that they're getting. And what you have here is a lot of sun, and these 3 are together. This one is getting a little sun. These 2 are not getting very much sun at all. And so this is beautiful. This, yeah, okay. And this is North Wind, and Shenandoah, Panicum virgatum switchgrass is gorgeous. And this, the Chasmantium latifolium, Northern Sea Oats. Well, I have it because I love the way it looks in the fall with the light going through it, but it sells seeds like crazy and they're hard to pull. Indian grass, again, is not an elegant, but it's airy and fun. And what I love is the way the inflorescence has these little things hanging out here. And I think it goes beautifully with the solidagos and the rudbeckias and that yellow color. And I have never had this until this year. I bought 5 at 4 inches. And I have them in front, and we'll see what they're going to do. But I have seen them in parks, and I have really enjoyed them. Now, people use them to fill big areas that can erode. And this is the way it looks in the spring and the summer, and then this is in the fall. Always make sure you know. For completeness, this is a beautiful grass. It's never looked like this in my house. So we are done. We have 15 minutes for questions, and then the perennials, you can just look at the slides. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Laura. And we have quite a lot of questions here, so we'll jump right in with our first one. One of our audience members wanted to know what materials you might recommend for someone who's looking to create a shaded path next to their house. They still need to be able to get their mower up and down the path, but the area is definitely too shaded for grass. It's got some large yews that arch over the path, and it's hard to get much to grow there. So I'm looking to see if you had any recommendations on what kind of path.
Well, how high? Because service berries can do it. And you know what can look beautifully with very little work is hellebores. The hellebores?
Yeah, the hellebores, those would be.
Yeah, and they take trauma, believe me. They can take a lot of trauma, and they just keep living. Yep. Yeah, I think that they're very nice, and I think that that's an okay thing. Mm-hmm. But that's a hard area. I mean, when you think about it.
It is, and I think maybe more of like a mulch or a crushed stone or a rock, something along those lines might make it a little more accessible to be able to.
With shade.
in and
Although,
out.
you know, carex and sages,
Mhm.
they can take a lot. And there's something called a hystrix, which is a shade, that is definitely a shade grass. I imagine you want something native or naturalistic. If that hystrix, Hystrix, is one of the grasses. You can look it up in the internet. And I think there is a picture in the email that you got of the hystrix. It says grasses for shade.
Perfect. Well, and I think that's what people were asking about also, if you had some recommendations on grasses that do well in shade, ornamental grasses specifically.
What grass?
Ornamental grasses.
Or ornamental grasses that do well in shade. If you have 4 hours of shade, that's par shade. The Callimagostis brachytachia, that one that I said was my favorite grass, Korean feather reed grass, that takes 4 hours of shade. Hystrix, there you go. But it's very hard to have. I have a north wind now that's getting only about 4 hours of sun, and it's doing okay. So, you know, but that's hard to have a grass, but carex can do fine and hystrix can do fine too.
Perfect. And are both of those in your handout for people?
Yes, I think so. I think on their carex, there's carex and sages section. And if you keep going, you can, you will see that it says grasses for shade. And I think it's way down at the bottom, or maybe I erased it, I don't know, but I think it's probably there. If not, she can call me and I can give her the name, but I'm pretty sure.
Perfect.
Anyway.
And on the topic of ornamental grasses, somebody was looking for suggestions on whether or not, when you divide your grasses and replant them, do you do it in the fall or do you wait until spring?
Spring. I wait till spring, but I think that because the fall doesn't give it time to recover, you know, the new transplanting ones. I do it in the spring, but that's me.
I would agree with you there. I think that's a good call. So with so many plants in your garden, there are several people that want to know, are there any pesticides that might be required or that you have to use in your garden to try to control pests?
You know, for the first time this year, I had those Japanese beetles. I hear they're all over. But aside from that, no, I don't have a lot of pests.
Yep.
Except for one. The Asclepia syriaca, which is the common milkweed, gets aphids like crazy. It doesn't do any harm. They just get aphids like crazy. And so I just do the water thing and it's always there. And I just leave them there. I talked to different people about that and they all seem to say, oh yes, you have that, you have aphids. Yep. But no, I don't use a lot of sprays because I think it's because I have so many plants and they're in good shape, but it doesn't allow a lot of secondary infections, as it were.
Well, and that kind of leads into somebody else's question is, do you have any good suggestions with this naturalistic style of planting on how to prevent or avoid some of those insect problems?
Well, it would have to be a specific insect problem that I could answer to, you know what I mean? But in general, I think if you keep it clean, you know, I leave a lot of the material that falls down there, but maybe every 2 or 3 weeks I go out there and get, if there's because you don't want mold to start. But so if you keep it pretty clean, if you see a particular thing like the aphids, for example, in the milkweed, and I know about that, I looked it up, there's no problem. no. If the other thing is, I think that if you have enough air in between your close planting, if you make it really, really close and there to the point where there's no air, you need ventilation. No, I think just keep it clean and accept aphids on your Asclepias, that's fine. I don't use very much of anything, to tell you the truth.
Well, that's good. And I think a lot of the things with the native plants too is they often attract native pollinators. So some of the things
Exactly.
your pests are actually going to be butterfly caterpillars or things like that.
And they're gonna eat them.
Yep. And you've got coneflower on the screen there, and I get the checkers.
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know why. And
Oh,
this
no.
is the one that, see this? Don't buy that. Not for the bird, not for the bees, I mean, or not for the insects.
Yep. So some
I'm sorry.
curious
Yeah.
on how you irrigate your garden. Do you use drip irrigation or what kind of watering techniques do you use?
I had the drip irrigation and I still have it in some areas. And then I decided that there is so much planting. I would have to have thousands of miles of hose. And it got to the point where if I had help, they would be cutting my drip irrigation hoses over and over, okay? So then I have the usual spray type of, for the grass and for some of the areas. But then what I do is I have about 4 sites where I keep hoses and I put them very, very slowly for a big area and I just let it drip until, you know, for about an hour, very, very slowly. Because I gave up on drip irrigation simply because there are so many areas and everything is filled with plants. And I was just having to fix all those hoses over and over because I need a little bit of help. And those people don't take care, you know, even though I'm there when they're doing it.
Very good.
I don't like to use hose irrigation. I like to use deep irrigation. So that's why I put the hose in an area and I just let it do its thing for an hour, but very, very slowly.
Good. Well, we talked a little bit already about ornamental grasses that do well in shade. How about a couple of your favorite native plants that maybe do well in shade as well?
Well, the reason why I am getting rid of some trees is because there are a lot of things that don't do well in shade with ornament, and I don't have that many complete shady areas. But I think that the Baptisias can take 4 hours. Penstemons, believe it or not, can do pretty well in partial shade. And I have the Warranima salvias. The Warranima type salvias, I have where they get only about 3 hours and they are beautiful. And the insects love them and the birds love them. The other one that does pretty well in shade, 3-4 hours, partial shade, are the agastache, the hyssops. They do very nicely in about 4 hours. And I know a lot of people think it should be full, but I do fine with the hyssops in shade. And I have the silphium, where in one of the areas is getting only about 4 to 3 hours of sun. And those are some of my favorite ones.
That's awesome. I think we had a couple more questions here. One of them is, what do you do, or what are some of the techniques that you use to fight powdery mildew in your garden?
I don't fight it. I haven't had powdery mildew. I got rid of the Monarda didyma. Okay, I'll tell you. I got rid of the Monarda dirima because I knew I could set my watch in the spring and it was going to be there. I buy powdery mildew resistant plants if at all possible. One of the things is don't get them wet late at night. And then the peonies right now, I just noticed, got powdery mildew for the first time because they're kind of shady area. I'm going to get rid of them and transplant them, but I just cut them down and wait till next year again. I try not to do very much for powdery mildew. Just buy the right plant for the right place. Keep them dry, even if they're resistant, because if they're resistant, they're still going to get powdery mildew if you have them in the wrong place.
Very good. Well, we have another question kind of related to powdery mildew that just came in. And they're asking if the resistant varieties of plants that are resistant to powdery mildew, are they usually just as good of a nectar source for some of the butterflies and hummingbirds?
Oh, yes. You know, I think Garden Gate had, well, the Chicago Botanical Garden did a study within the last 10 years, and they showed the different problems with powdery mildew and so forth. And they approved some and didn't approve others, but it was never a problem with the insects. And also Mount Cuba Botanical Garden, yeah, Mount MT Cuba, like Cuba. Botanical Garden has a beautiful handout on that, a little booklet, because they did studies on Monardas, which are the ones that have powdery mildew, and they're a good source.
Very good.
They can look Mount Cuba in the internet.
Mm-hmm. A couple people were also asking which, you mentioned an English or a place in England where you got some of your plants.
Chiltern seeds, CHILTERN''S. Chiltern, oh no, no apostrophe, no S. Chiltern seeds, CHILTERN. And look it up in the internet and you can order, they actually can send you a catalog, one of those that are about half a page, but the booklet is beautiful, but they're about like half a magazine long, and they have beautiful, beautiful pictures, a lot of information, and excellent seeds, and they come with the nicest stamps on the envelope.
That's awesome. Somebody else here had asked a question if they've got an area along their fence where they've got quite a bit of root competition from some cottonwood trees and old yews, but there's plenty of space in between the plants to put some more native plants. And so do you have any suggestions for plants that maybe do better with root competition?
I always get that question and I don't really have an answer. But I was just reading on the Fine Gardening, I think, and they said that the best thing was use pots.
Absolutely.
And that was in the last 2 months. Use pots. What can I say? Root competition is terrible. It really is.
It is.
There's just nothing you can do about it, you know?
There's really not. With that, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up tonight's presentation and pass it back over to Julie. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Laura, for that great presentation. I did want to mention to people who might have missed it, you mentioned a book by Lynn Steiner called Prairie-Style Gardens.
And it's out of print.
It is out of print, but the library has it. So if people are interested, you might want to come and check out the library's garden collection. Look on our webpage and you'll be able to see that and other gardening books that will give you more information. I also want to thank Matthew and the other K-State Research and Extension folks for helping with tonight's program.